Calling the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Member Narian? Is it Narian?
Present.
Member Joe, or Duiziak, I'm sorry.
You call me Joe. You're present.
Okay. Member Chair Strettenberg? Strettenberg?
Present.
Thank you. Member Solomon?
Present.
Member Maruko?
Present.
Member Pinsler? Member Winter?
Present. Here.
Okay, and then I'm going to go do the alternates. Member Light is absent. Member Craig? Member Whittam? Member Gaddis, not here. Member Hensley? Member Young? And Tabaris, not here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Morocco, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please rise, face the flag. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I will make the motion to approve the order of agenda. With that, I would propose to move item J2 to be under items continued from previous agendas and to delete all other J items from this agenda.
May I ask you to inquire why?
Now, can you repeat that again, please?
Repeat that, please.
Yeah, to move item J2 under I, items continued from previous agenda, and delete all other J items from this agenda, meaning J1 and J3 through J8.
Inquiry?
Yes.
Is there a reason that you want to delete all the other J items?
Yes, because as the resolution stands now and amended on June 14th, it states the subject matters reviewed shall be set by the Charter Review Advisory Committee. It has changed from the original resolution. So the only method we have to place an item on the agenda is for the committee to do so. And at the last meeting, we did not place any items on the agenda. And we can do that tonight for the next meeting, but that precludes, it would be a violation of the resolution to have these on the agenda as they are.
It's a point of order. How are you going to get around J2?
Moving J2 to I, because it should correctly be under I. It's continued from the last meeting. We did discuss that at the last meeting and continued that.
Mike, what's up?
So you're kind of having a discussion on J1 because you're explaining it. So I don't know about pulling J1 and J2. J3 through 9 is, we were in a no man's land.
Through 8, you mean?
J3 through 8. The council did change it to, discuss whatever they want. It'd be good to have the discussion on J1 and maybe postpone the decision on, because it requires a discussion of J1 to explain where we are. But I had committed to you bringing back J3 through J8, the subject matters, on this date. And city manager and some staff are available to discuss it. You don't have to discuss it because now the good news and the bad news is that, how are you?
Howdy.
The good news and the bad news is you have total freedom with what you want to talk about. Absolute total freedom. The bad news is you have to wrap up all your work and report to the council by November 1st. And so it's up to you if you want to have a discussion or not.
Well, it seems to me that this is one of the specific items that the council asked us to look into.
But those specific items are gone from the resolution now.
Yeah, so can we please discuss, because we're de facto discussing
It's a
J1.
horse, the horse before the cart kind of thing. And
But if you could say, if we could discuss it. So what happened was the council made a motion and had a discussion, and then made a substitute motion, and then had a substitute to the substitute motion that was amended by a friendly amendment. And they, handled you could have to meet at least once a month. Alternates don't have to appear. You can appear remotely. They want all your recommendations by November 1st. And finally, it's entirely up to you what to discuss and deliberate. And that's what changed. Now, you can, in using that discretion, you can factor in any number of things that we talked about in terms of, do we take stuff that we know we can get on the agenda that may be less controversial? Do we take into account if we think a majority of the council will support it? Do we take into account, do we think a majority of the voters will support it? Because all those things have to happen for there to be a charter amendment. And with some of the substantive things, if you change, we have an elaborate system of checks and balances. You change one check and balance, it could affect everything else. So, but it's entirely in your discretion. And I didn't want, the committee was as a whole so concerned about the time, and that was before the direction to move up, getting all I didn't want to waste, another meeting by not putting on, it's okay, now you have your rules, nothing to talk about.
Morocco, yes.
I move that we table the order, approving the order of the agenda till after item. You can.
We
under
have to
Roberts.
begin with,
But under Roberts, you can move the agenda items around, including that. So I'm suggesting
haven't
we put
adopted
it after
Roberts yet.
J1.
We're not under Roberts.
Well, if I could interject,
Yeah,
please.
Member
it-
Solomon. Go ahead, Member Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. If I can interject, I tend to agree with the chair in that the resolution number 5 in the resolution was deleted and replaced by specific language not allowing, or I should say, instructing that members of the elected officials, for example, or staff would not be responsible for items on the agenda, but it would be up to the committee for items on the agenda. So from a very technical standpoint, we can't discuss, we shouldn't have things on the agenda that the committee hasn't agreed to have on the agenda. J1 and J2 are items that we continued from the last meeting and should probably be under item I, items continued from previous agendas. But if we're going to follow the rules according to the resolution in the way it was set up, it should be that we only discuss things that we agreed in the last meeting for this meeting, for items J3 through J8. But I would also, just from a technical standpoint, like to see J1 and J2 would probably more properly be under continued items. Thank you.
Okay, I would amend my motion then to move items J1 and J2 under items continued from previous agendas and remove all other J3 through J8 as they were agendized. J3 through J8, yes. They were put on the agenda, whereas the resolution subject matters reviewed shall be set by the Charter Review Advisory Committee, and that is the only method provided. Things changed.
Absolutely correct. But, it was, and I have no problem with doing that as the preferred technical matter. But you have a very difficult, complex task and not a lot of time. And so I didn't want to cause that because the minute specifically said that I would bring those items back to you. And they were on the original resolution, and the only reason they weren't on your last meeting is the city manager was preoccupied with the budget and couldn't be here at your first meeting. But
Understood, but with the way the sequence happened, the June 14th was in place before this agenda went out.
absolutely correct.
Mr. Pinsler?
We can amend all of the J items to remove the words possible action and just have the discussion.
Actually, we can't. That would be a Brown Act violation.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's an agendized item. It is not illegal to discuss issues as long as we don't take an action.
I would refer you to Fraser v. Dixon. It is now settled that the term meeting is used in the Brown Act is not limited to gatherings at which action is taken by the relevant legislative body. Deliberative gatherings are included as well. Deliberation in this context connotes not only collective decision-making, but also the collective acquisition and exchange of facts preliminary to the ultimate decision.
So if I may weigh in, it's not a Brown Act violation, and not because you can discuss it without taking action. You're correct. But it is on the agenda. The only question is whether you're violating the resolution of the council. And technically, you are, because you haven't set up. But it is definitely not a Brown Act violation. But depending on what rules you set up, if you set up the two-step process that is in your draft based on the direction that are received from you, it'll be important to spend a lot of time on referrals to staff and making certain that each of you get your items for the second step on the next meeting that you have. So you're both right. It's just that it's not a Brown Act violation, but for a different reason.
I knew you were a lawyer.
Well, as Yogi Bear says, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So let's do something.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a motion. There is no second at this point.
I'll second the chair's motion so that we can have a vote on.
Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Can we ask the public if they wish?
I have any public participation on this? Public comments?
Repeat the motion, please.
To move items J1 and J2 under section I, items continued from previous agendas, and to remove items J3 through J8 from the current agenda.
Can I just be clear? So the issue is that we did, even though we requested that the items that were in the original appointment be on the agenda.
We did not.
So we did.
We never did.
I thought that
We
we
talked
had
about 'em, but
directed that those be put on the agenda.
We didn't even have a method to agendize things at that point.
Well, you had a method, and the council changed the method. And I committed to you based on your discussion, and there was no need for a vote because you had direction that the council had
but that has
set
now gone
forward.
away.
But that's gone, and if you watch the tape,
It's confusing.
it's not confusing, but it was, the council did what the council did. And I asked them questions, okay, do you really mean this? And they said yes, and then a council person asked for clarification, and the motion maker, the mayor pro tem, specifically said those items. And so it technically, it would be more correct to have the discussion on J1, which we're having, and then the discussion on J2, because that will be important in terms of if you're going to have a chance to try and get substantive work done by November 1, because whatever you choose for your rules and how you choose to get things on the agenda will make a big impact, will have a big impact on it.
Okay, any other discussion or comments for the vote?
So you discussed it, you didn't have a vote, but there was no need to have a vote because It was there.
It was assigned to us.
It was assigned to you,
Yes.
and now they've changed the assignment.
What was the rationale?
You don't
That's a
ask
silly
me to explain the rationale. What happened was I committed to you that I'd work with the clerk to put the simple fix of at least once so that you could have more meetings to try and get your work done. On the, I think, the second meeting in June. Before I could do that, because we didn't have time to agendize it from our Thursday meeting till the Tuesday, the council made a referral to bring back a resolution, but they wanted the potential for more expansive changes. And what we'll talk about in J1 and are talking about are the more expansive changes that they made.
Mr. Webb, are we able to have postpone the vote, this vote on the order of the agenda until after a discussion of two items on the agenda?
I raised that point already and made a motion which wasn't seconded.
Can you have a discussion before? Well, yeah, you could remove it a different way. You could leave the order to the agenda, and then if you feel compelled by the same logic, you could remove J3 through 8. You could possibly, in J2, put in your rules that, if you could put in a special rule that if something is agendized because of previous direction from the council, you can have a discussion. You're trying to be creative because it wouldn't violate the Brown Act.
But we don't have that at this point.
Yes, we
Because
do.
you haven't done J2 yet. So.
We haven't done it.
So we could move J2 up to I, have our discussion before we delete the J3 through 8 items.
You can delete J3 through 8, not through order the approval of the agenda, but you could just postpone it or, take a motion to continue these items or table these items, depending on what rules you pass.
Can we move them to K?
You can. Depends on what your rules are for mayor and council referrals to staff.
So we can have discussions of 3 through 8 as referrals to staff.
Depends on what you do with J2.
But we can't discuss them, but we can make referrals.
You could have, if you do the two-step, you could have the discussion tonight whether a majority of you want to have to have a full staff report on 3 through 8 at the next meeting. You could do that. So that would save a step. If you adopt the two process, it would be anything referrals to staff you make tonight will be at your next meeting. There won't be a staff report. Whoever puts it on will get to try and discuss it and justify it to a majority of the committee members, and then you'd have the full staff report. If your rules, you could,
We're getting into a discussion on those rules now, too.
well, we had a discussion on J1, so.
It's agendized, so it's not a Brown Act violation.
Correct, absolutely
We
correct.
have any discussion at all that we want on something that's on the agenda. That's the way that the agendas work.
But
We can talk about it, and if we don't take an action, it's still not violating the Brown Act.
Absolutely correct. And moving to K may make sense because you're just doing step 1, which is, does the majority still want to talk about this and have a full report? You can leave early tonight because we won't have the full report on those items, but we'll get the sense if a majority of the council wants to talk about that. So your next meeting, instead of just having step 1, we'll have step 2, and then step 1 on anything an individual committee member brings up tonight.
But that's only if we stick to the step 2 process or 2-step process, and I'm
That's
not getting it. I have a substitute for that would get around that. So, but I don't want to get into that discussion because we're not there yet.
Can we vote on the question?
On which question?
You made a motion to delete that from the agenda, and it was seconded by Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
I think it's
We're ready.
appropriate to take a vote on it, and I think that it probably will be voted down, but we'll see.
Well, it'd be a violation of the resolution.
No,
As I said, we are deciding that so we can make our decision and take the consequences that come with it. So call the question and just have us vote.
I've already called for a vote.
Okay.
I called for a roll call vote.
Member Duizak,
Aye.
Member Solomon,
Vote aye.
okay, Member Morocco?
Is that me?
Yeah, Morocco?
Oh, no,
Am I saying it wrong?
yes,
Morocco.
but I'm voting no.
Okay, how do I,
To say Morocco, that's fine.
Morocco, okay.
I'm voting no.
Okay. Member Nerium? I'm saying that wrong too, I know.
It's fine.
I'll get it. Member Pinsler?
no.
Member Wonderly?
No.
Chairperson Strenberg?
Aye. Motion passes 4-3. So with that, we have an order of agenda.
Have a nice day,
Hopefully we'll see you.
assuming there isn't a substitute motion.
Or another council resolution.
Blue folder items. We need a motion to receive and file those.
I have those.
I move.
So
Second.
the blue folder items that I have is for, it's I2, and it's the rules and conduct from the city attorney.
I2 and which, I'm sorry?
The one for, I guess you're considering it is I2, which is the rules and procedures. It's the rules and conduct from the city attorney's office, from the city attorney. And that's it.
So there's a motion, is
There
there a
would be
second?
another blue folder item for J5.
I was just gonna
but
say, yeah, I've got
is not
J5
on the
here. and I
agenda
don't-
anymore.
That's a moot
Correct.
point anyway.
Yeah, it's
That's why I'm not, I will come back.
We can still receive and file it.
Correct.
So there's a motion, is there a second?
I'm
Second.
not sure we can because it's not on the
Yeah.
agenda.
You're exactly.
It's not on the agenda,
You're
so we
pulling
can't
J5,
receive and file
So
it.
we can't receive and file.
Okay.
Correct. I guess I can use that.
Then we've got to change the order of the agenda again.
You know, this is the part I really didn't miss.
I didn't miss that either.
I just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, I'm getting flashbacks here.
So this item is for, your J5 is now non-agenda item, which is related to Budget and Finance procurement minutes from September 23rd and Budget and Finance Commission Administrative Report from September 23rd, and also the Moss Adam roles and responsibilities.
Okay, so we need a motion to receive what is listed as blue folder item for J2 as I2 and receive what is listed as J5 under non-agenda.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote again, please.
Member Duizak,
Aye.
Member Solomon,
Aye.
Member Morocco.
Aye.
Member Narian,
Aye.
Member Pinsler,
No,
Member Wonderly,
Aye.
Chairperson Strenberg.
Aye. Motion passes 6-1. All right, moving on to consent calendar. Anyone like to pull any item from the consent calendar? Any members of the public like to pull or comment on an item from the consent calendar? Okay. I would like to pull item F2. So we'll vote on item F1. Have a motion and a second?
Also, I just
I'm
want to
gonna
mention,
recuse myself because I wasn't here.
I'm sorry, Eleanor, what?
I just want to mention, I just want to get a confirmation from Member Solomon that he posted the agenda at his location. Just want to confirm
Yes, I
that.
posted the agenda and affidavit on the day the agenda came out.
Perfect. Thank you.
are they knocking at your door?
No one yet.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Motion passes unanimous. And now for excluded consent calendar items, item 2, which is the minutes. Allow me to get my notes here. Yeah, first thing I'd like to ask about is the way that with the roll call is listed. For the minutes, you listed members present and you listed member Craig. However, he is an alternate. And he is, per the resolution, he is always an alternate, but he is a voting alternate when he is present. So members present should be Solomon, Morocco, Narain, Pinsler, Wonderly, and Chair Strutzenberg. Members absent, alternate members present would be Craig. Members absent would be Dwidziak. And with the rewriting of the resolution, since alternates are no longer required to attend, I would say we no longer need to include them in the roll call, and they could be taken off. They were never required. They just clarified that they were not required to attend.
Okay,
So move member Craig to alternate members present.
all right, okay.
Strike Woodham, Hensley, and Young from that list.
Well,
Leave.
this is the minutes from June 2nd, so I gotta keep them, I mean, the Craig part, I understand.
Yeah.
But to remove the alternate, they were here on June 2nd, and that was prior to the resolution.
But even then, under the original resolution, they weren't required.
Is there
They
a
were.
reason for this?
They what?
Is there a reason for this?
They're required.
Good question.
Is there a reason for this?
Yeah, just straighten out so it's clear in the records. Because when the public reads this, they're not sure who the actual members are and who,
Person who is sitting in the seat is a member.
no, not per the resolution. They're identified as a voting alternate member.
So how would it be laid out then?
It would be alternate members present would be Craig.
People who are in attendance, we wouldn't list them at
No.
all?
Wouldn't it be alternate voting member present and to keep the alternate members?
Maybe we should make a right-handed, left-handed voting member. Hey, this is insane. This is truly insane.
Okay. So going forward then,
Right. We will change that going forward. But I mean, Craig will go under alternate because he's an alternate, not a problem. But at this point, I'm not going to, going forward, the alternates aren't required to be here.
correct.
So that will be different.
Okay. And then could we also designate if members were present via Zoom? Or do we need under the roll call?
You know, I'm not going to differentiate with that. I don't do that for all the other commissions.
Okay, because we have alternate members, well, we're no longer going to roll call them, so it won't matter going forward. Okay.
A little bit.
And then there was a page number 4 under L4. Says City Attorney Webb gave a report and discussed Brown Act compliance and suggested clarifying what the committee members see as a whole see in their rules, or is it set in their rules?
Okay, I don't know where you're at. So which paragraph?
First paragraph L4.
Oh, the first. I'm still looking for is it second to the last?
I'm sorry, what?
I'm still looking for the paragraph, I'm sorry.
First paragraph under
Oh,
L4
first, okay, sorry.
on page 4.
Okay, I would have to check.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And that was it? So with that, the only change then would be for the roll call would show Craig under alternate members present.
Right, and then the one, we would check on the video, and we would go ahead and change that.
Very good. So motion to approve the minutes with those changes.
So that it's clear, the change is going to be, Mr. Craig is going to be put in. I'll be marked as absent. And what else?
No, it's not going to be changed from the last, it's
From the
going
last one.
forward. It's going forward. is
Well,
what,
the Craig would be still change on the last
No,
one.
she's talking about you're talking about the minutes, right, from the last one?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, we were talking about last meeting.
Right.
Right.
So Craig would
All
be
of that.
the
So-
alternate, and then I would check the video part on.
The seer set, okay.
Right.
So I have a
Those are
question.
the only two that would change.
Yes, Mr. Moore.
So when we start this meeting, you do a full roll call of everybody. So are you going to be changing that procedure too?
What do you mean, I do roll call?
You
at
went through the
beginning?
members and you went through the alternates. Are you going to be changing
No.
that?
Well, yeah,
procedure?
I won't be doing the alternates going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and even for this one, it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, it wasn't necessary.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, I believe. Did you catch who did the second?
No, I didn't catch this.
I'll second.
All in favor?
no,
Aye.
All in favor?
no.
I will call for no votes,
Aye.
Mr. Pinsler. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you.
May I ask a personal privilege question? I've been informed that the television broadcast is frozen on the other end.
That's great.
So I don't know if that's something technically that your people would want to
On the
look
other
into,
Okay.
where it's being broadcast to.
Oh,
All right, moving on to section H, public participation on non-agenda items. This section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to comment on any subject that does not appear on this agenda for action. This section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker will be afforded 3 minutes to address the commission. Could we change that to committee in the future? Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once. Written request, if any, will be considered first under this section. I see no written requests. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak?
Future discussion item. I know Mr. Webb had mentioned it at the first meeting we had, but I did a little bit of research, and there are a substantial number of cities that are involved in litigation with regard to school board elections, in particular, whether they be at large or by district. I know that we don't have it agendized yet. Some of you will probably talk about it in the future, but I know like Santa Monica, and there's like 4 other cities I saw that were involved in litigation. So it's probably something we should agendize for a future discussion. That's all.
Yeah, that was noted in the last minutes. Anyone else? Any Zoom or e-comments?
I have no Zoom. I think we have one comment.
We have one comment. It's from Paul Moses. Have you ever been to the circus when the little car drives out under the big top and clown after clown gets out? That's what the Charter Review Advisory Committee is. The committee is nothing but a sham to give the appearance of legitimacy to their unethical actions. Their main goal is to eliminate the position of elected city attorney and make it an appointed position. The city attorney is the only check on the city attorney is the only check on the power of the mayor, his council cronies. This was attempted years ago. It failed because Redondo voters saw the corrupt intent. Redondo voters know better than to let those in power write the rules. If there is any elected position that should be eliminated, it should be the office of mayor. This concludes e-comments for H.
Okay. Seeing no one else, moving on to section I, we have what is now J1 prior is now classified as I1. Discussion by Mr. Webb.
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, the council made a resolution. There's good news and bad news. And the good news is it's entirely up to this group what to discuss and what to deliberate and what to recommend moving forward to the council. The bad news is you have to get all your recommendations to the council by November 1st, so they can discuss it at their first meeting in November. That concludes my presentation.
Here we are wasting a meeting.
Yeah, I was took the words out of my mouth.
And that is why I had honored my commitment to you at the last meeting based on the previous resolution to bring forward those items.
In that discussion, and I've watched it several times, I didn't see anything moved that asked to remove the list that was there. What was discussed was to allow the committee to select the order in which the items are addressed.
I have not watched it several times. I haven't had the time. I know the clerk has watched relevant portions. I did watch the end, and there's no question that the motion was that they can decide what they discuss and deliberate on. So and there was questioning I recall making, though I haven't watched it, in terms, okay, so they can select it. There's no more compartmentalizing. There's no orders. I think Councilman Nierenheim said something like power to the people, which I grant you is more of a slogan than a motion, but they were clear with the amendments to it. There is no limit, as long as it's dealing with a charter amendment, to what you can talk about, and there's no order that it's to take place. So there's good news.
And did
It's
you,
entirely up to you.
in
There's
that
bad
discussion,
news.
did you hear the request to remove the list from the resolution?
They amended the list, so it was all up to you.
Us.
Yeah.
So why, this is insane. Why can we not talk about 3 through 9? We can, if we want to. If we want to use the time that we have been allotted to deal with issues. Now, frankly, these issues are probably less controversial than some of the others that might be coming along. These are functional issues.
You do realize we sent the staff home.
I know.
And
just wanna
you
make
did
sure.
vote to remove it from the agenda when you set the
Yeah,
order of
exactly.
agenda. So you could have, as I told you before, I think it's questionable that you can do it now. But yeah, you could have.
But the staff is not here to
It'd be
talk about
fruitless to do it now.
it. Sorry?
It would be fruitless to do it now.
Right, because the staff is not here.
I think there can be, it's not as fruitful as it would have been to get into the substantive areas, but there is,
Let me ask you this question. Is that loosely interpreted like we'll have to hear it again? We can do it tonight, but yeah, we're going to have to do it at another meeting?
well,
That's how I interpret that.
okay, so what will be fruitful is talking about your rules, because as I mentioned, the next item, that will really impact, you have two continuums, which is two-step, and it empowers each of you to at least get a discussion on something that is of interest to you. The downside is it will take longer because it's a two-step process. So you want to give some thoughts to that. The chair has already indicated he has an amendment to that from what was the general consensus of the committee or discussion of the committee. And then, under referrals to staff, if you do adopt that, that would be a great time to make certain anything you want to talk about in the step one process gets on the agenda. If you choose a one-step process, which is what the council does, you can, I'd like to move this issue. I'd like to have the direct staff to put this issue on it, and then without discussion, you can take a majority vote and see if a majority of the council. Now, Committee Member Pinsler believes that that violates the Brown Act. We've had that discussion. There's a case 5 or 6 years ago out of Culver City that actually says you can do that, but that wasn't the general consensus. So it can be fruitful in that whatever decisions you make under I-2 will determine how quickly you go, but also limit how much an individual committee member gets their ideas discussed. And then item K is really making certain that next meeting is more fruitful, because whichever process you take, you don't have a lot of time to waste. And so it's important to use item K well tonight.
So any further discussion on item I1, which is the resolution? That's where. Any public comment? Zoom or e-comments?
We have none on Zoom. None on e-comment.
We have no e-comments and no attendees at this time in Zoom.
So moving on to item I2, the discussion of possible action pertaining to establishing the committee rules and procedures. We have a draft that's been provided to us.
So you have a draft. It essentially makes clear what you have to do pursuant to the council amended resolution, that you can remotely appear, and it codifies the time by which you have to tell the clerk and where you're going to be, because that information has to comply with the current state of the Brown Act, which may change. But what information she needs to post and what your obligations are. It's different a little bit in that there's a charter section that mandates a majority of the council be in this room. And so there, it's the first two to get to the clerk. You could all appear remotely. And as long as you give the information to the clerk and she publicizes it and you post it outside wherever you're appearing and make it available to the public, then you can appear. I did, the last section is the two-step process. And as I said, that gives the greatest ability to each of you to have your items discussed by the committee as a whole.
No, it doesn't. The one-step process does.
Well, the one-step process, well, I take it back. So the one-step process, the way I'm using the one-step process is it's the Culver City. It's what the mayor and council do. I want to direct staff to list this on the next agenda. And then if there's a majority vote, it's full report to the next agenda. If it's just each committee member can have a full discussion, the potential is you have 100 items and staff is not going to be able to prepare the information you may want to have a true and full discussion of it. So it's something that if you can't just on the vote, can't get any sort of discussion where you can't present your idea to the committee, that is not as empowering to each individual committee member. But as I'm using the one-step process, it means you don't waste a meeting. Any item that you put on there that
Sorry about that.
just on the vote, can't get any sort of discussion.
I'm gonna take you off of here.
What's that?
Sorry about that.
But anyways, it's your, it's your decision what to do with it.
If I could propose what I think it would address what you're looking for. I would, under section 6 is what we're talking about here. Committee member request for future agenda items. I would replace item A. I'm going to keep what's written there as an item B. However, I would put as item A being the primary that by a majority vote of the voting members or their alternate in their absence present, any item may be placed directly on a future agenda for a full report, discussion, and action.
It's the same problem. The problem is that, albeit understanding that we're here for a limited time. So let us say I go home tonight and I have an idea that I want to get onto an agenda. That idea cannot get on for 2 months.
Incorrect.
No, it cannot get on for 2 months because you've got to put it on the agenda. I didn't do it tonight. I think about it overnight and I understand it tomorrow. I have to come back a month from now and tell you what I thought about. And you then say, oh, that was a good idea. Let's put it on for the month after that. And the problem is that we have 5 meetings.
So one of
we've got.
the ways you
Can't
can
have
amend,
more.
one of the ways you can amend that is by a time certain, which would enable the
Right, 4
clerk to
meetings.
post it. You say, so for example, I think you've got until the Wednesday before the agenda's posted at 4 o'clock to notify the clerk, and you're going to be appearing remotely. You could indicate that you can add something to that one-step process. You wouldn't have to do it tonight. You think about it after the meeting. You would be able to get it on for the first step.
But the first step requires the staff to be able to respond, perhaps, likely.
Well, no.
There's a likelihood that something will come up that the staff will have to respond to, or someone will have to respond to. We have 4 meetings left to get something done by November.
Unless we do additional meetings, which we can now.
We can. But
And realize too that by November are the things that would be appropriate for the next ballot. There may be things on the list that aren't necessary for the next ballot.
I don't think that's what was said. They wanted us to get our work done by November.
That wasn't said. They wanted a report by November 1st.
No, they say they wanted all your things by November
So you've
1st.
got
That was
4
the
meetings
language.
left. So we're screwing around with this meeting because of this stupidity. But
Let's keep it civil, sir.
no, it's not.
Let's keep it civil,
The
sir.
thing about this arrangement is that any idea we have right now is 2 meetings from now. It's very likely that if there's a backup of idea, there are things that they have asked us to do, or they asked us to do in the past, right? It was a list. And I agree, we should discuss all those things on the list, but there may be other things. If that is going to be set back so that we have to have either extra meetings or we run into the November meeting. Now, remember, the November meeting will be at the end of November, which is Thanksgiving weekend. In fact, our meeting is scheduled
You
for
have to have
Thanksgiving.
it by November 1st.
So we have an October meeting, so we now have only 3 meetings left.
But I will point out that you were the one arguing in favor of the 2-step process.
I was not, I've never liked the 2-step process.
Well, you
No.
thought the 1-step process, which is all of you taking a vote, violates the Brown Act.
No, that's not
And
the
if
1-step
you're
process.
saying that one committee member can put it on, then
That's my opinion.
it becomes, so you can do that. These are all options for you. But if each of you has 20 ideas, how are we going to deal with an agenda that has 100 items on it? And staff is not going to know which items
There aren't
to,
100 ideas in here.
okay, 10 items. You each have 10. There are 50 items. Well, one item probably impacts the other items
Yes, they do.
in many ways. And so how is there a way to prioritize those ideas? How is there a way for staff to know what to fully report? And there becomes an issue if staff can't get to it. I mean, difficult enough with this extra meeting that initially we hadn't scheduled for, trying to get stuff done. One of the things I'll tell you is the agenda is based on the council agenda, and it needs to be reformatted. Because when I went through it, you'll notice like the first three are one way, and the next two are another way, and the ends is the third one. And there's a history of when it went from, the council staff to the city clerk and back to the city manager's office, and I'll do it slightly different. So we'll have to paginate that. But if you have, and I'm just pointing out, I don't want staff to be in the position of having to sort through that. So you can absolutely pass a rule that any committee member can have an item on for full discussion. There may or may not be a staff report. There may or may not be too many items.
Yep.
A majority of the council may have no interest in having a discussion on that. And the worrisome thing about your task, and it's this is a constitution, and trying to rewrite a constitution with 4 meetings plus a couple of others, and it can't be, once it gets approved by the voters, it is a daunting task to undo. But it is entirely, I'm just pointing out the problems with each of those methods, and you have to decide. It's your rules.
Okay, so,
Mr. Webb?
yes, Mr. Solomon.
Mr. Webb, could we, on a clear day, you can foresee forever, right? Could we have a rule whereby in the one-step process, or excuse me, two-step process, whereby if a committee member wanted to have 10 ideas, but they would yet prioritize and say, I would like 1 idea with a staff report and these for consideration for discussion. Would that be something that we could do? So if a committee member had an idea that they prioritize.
Well, they could, but there's no guarantee that staff's going to be able to get them. I think the chair's suggestion
Is the shortest.
well,
route.
it provides you both, but not exactly what you want. It provides that if you have an idea afterwards, then even though you won't get a full presentation to the committee to convince the majority, it's just, a yes or no vote, do we want to discuss it? You can tonight, if the chair's amendment is adopted, you can tonight put things on for full discussion next week. And if it doesn't obtain a majority, you would still retain the right to put it on discussion for next meeting at a different section, probably under K, to be able to try and persuade your fellow committee members that it deserves the full discussion if you can't get it tonight. So I do see the difference between the chair's decision. So, yes, Mr. Solomon, you can. The problem will be each of you you could have a committee member that wants to have discussions about all of his or her items. You can have someone who tries to say, well, I really want to talk about this, but we can, have something without a staff report. It's up to you. So I feel like I'm talking too much in terms of what the consequences could be, but I prefer not to have unproductive meetings.
The original list provided under the original resolution remains as a recommendation. Obaji stated that clearly.
No, it's not there.
It's not in the resolution.
It's not there anymore.
It's not there.
Well,
It just isn't
I would say
there.
it's very possible that it will come back in yet another amendment to the resolution.
Speaking at the city council.
Yes.
Well, you know,
So
the council
that
could
list-
do whatever they want, but you could, as a committee member, you could decide, you know what? Maybe they didn't really mean to do that. It was late night when they took up this item after a lengthy discussion in the budget. And we know at least there was initial interest in discussing those items. So if you know, whatever method is discussed, I wouldn't be surprised to see those items back on there, council resolution or not.
Mr. Obaji stated specifically it remains as a recommendation.
Mr. Obaji
It's not in- it's not- didn't make it into the resolution.
Yes. So,
The fact is, it remains. We know those are the things that remain that we want to address those. Those remain a top priority. That's more than enough to fill a calendar between now and November, and we may not get to all those. And that's possible.
It's possible, but
And if we don't, things may change. I wouldn't be too concerned about that at this point. So, yeah. So we have, the most expedient is what I've offered is that we vote to put these things on the next agenda and for full discussion, not a two-step process. So add a section that says with a majority vote of the committee, they go on to the next agenda. That's the best we have right now. And then if there are things that an individual member would like to put on the agenda that the committee for some reason does not support as a majority, they can still be put on as a two-part process. You have
that
an
is
A
correct.
and a B.
Yep. But I think what committee member, Pinsler, feels is deficient is he thinks you don't have enough time and each committee member should be able to get it just on the next,
you got three
meeting.
scheduled meetings.
Yeah, and so, and the downside is what happens if you're overwhelmed? How does staff pick and choose? How do you prioritize them? But this is all up to you. There is a significant difference. Yours is kind of a compromise position, but it doesn't go far enough towards an individual committee member's.
Well, the individual committee member,
In his view.
I understand that. But what's written there as A right now would remain as a B.
I understand, and I think it does give you significant ability to move quickly on things that the majority of the committee wants to have. I was just trying to.
While not in the current resolution, through the history, we have a clear understanding of what the council had proposed as priorities.
Restate your A.
Okay, so the A is by a majority vote of the voting members or their alternate in their absence. This is only repeating what's in the resolution for clarity. So it's basically just a majority vote. Any item may be placed directly on a future agenda for a full report, discussion, and action. Not the two-step process, but moving directly to the step two. Now, the two-step process.
Okay, can I get you to stop?
Yes.
Can you, because you're running at risk of falling into the trap the council does often. You're explaining mid-motion. So state your motion and then you can describe the
Well, there's going to be
reasons
more
for it.
changes to.
Well, state that part of it, and then you can explain why you're in favor. But
else?
if you don't state it, then,
I will.
Okay.
Mr. Morocco.
So I have my own proposed changes as well, but I do have a general question on the staff report. So what I saw in this last packet we have, all they're doing is regurgitating the same item that's in the charter. Is that the extent of the staff report, or is there going to be something more to it than that? Because what I would propose, if I want something on the agenda, I'm going to come forth with my proposed language for the charter item, as well as 2 or 3 reasons why, and somehow get that into the system. So what I saw from what's on the other items that we're not talking about today is just the regurgitation of the charter.
so I can't tell you what the applicable staff will provide you, because, these were suggestions that they have. I think it's frankly a lack of time because we just finished the budget. And I think you typically would get reasons in favor of it, reasons, PowerPoints in favor of anything that they suggest. If you propose an item, it depends. So if you propose an item dealing with the elected positions, at least two of them, you'll get a full report from me as to reasons for or against, or any change in the check and balance. I will state, that. If it's administrative matters, because that was one of the things that was removed, I would anticipate with more time, you'd get reasons for or against, making a proposed change and making a specific proposed change. So I think in general, but I just can't commit to that if it deals with a department that isn't mine.
Any question? Do you want to talk? No.
Well, I'm going to start going through the other revisions and make that part of the overall motion unless anybody has any further comment.
Tell me how A and B are not conflicting each other. It's either A or B.
Back to the fork in the road.
No,
It's A and B, the way I understood it, which is A, hey, if a majority of you say, we want to talk about this and we want to have a staff report if possible, and we want the ability to make a decision, then it's on there. And if a majority of you don't, you're still going to get it on for step one, which won't have a staff report, won't have an ability to take action that night, but will have the opportunity for each of you to try and persuade the others through discussion, here's why this item needs to be on there. So it's A and B as I understood him explaining it. I haven't heard the exact language, but that's what I think I hear.
To me, you're saying you can try, and B, if you try and it fails, you can try again.
you can, yes, that is essentially what it is.
Why?
Because
If you're already told no, you want me to slap me again? I mean,
Well, but under the Brown Act, you can't have discussion as to why in order to comply with the Brown Act. So if it's like, there's not a particular item, we want this. Okay, yeah, and there's majority. But you can't have hey, here's the reasons why we need to do that. That's
a
allowed
discussion.
under the step one process. But without, but you can't, that's not allowed under step one, but it would be allowed under step two. So in other words, you first try and see if there's general consent. And if there isn't, you get a chance to persuade your fellow committee members. I'm not arguing for or against it. I'm just trying to explain why it's
for example,
different.
tonight, we want to place things on the next agenda, as the resolution states, and we want to do that directly. We don't want that to be a two-step process, and currently, the only one that was offered was the two-step process. I'm adding a one-step process.
get rid of the two-step.
But I think we still leave the two-step there, because if something doesn't make it under the one-step, it still gives the right of the individual committee members to persuade the committee to take up.
Okay.
I think the benefit that comes from it is, as you said, we have a limited number of meetings.
Mhm.
And so it does give us an opportunity to at least throw out the concept and see if there's any, problem with it. And then at least we'll be able to have a discussion and get it through the process. It encourages us to be more efficient in our work. So I like the part about throwing all of this J3 through 8 onto the next agenda. I think we could even throw the city attorney, the city clerk and the city treasurer onto that as well, because that was part of the council's initial recommendation. And, but I have some ideas that I want to share today as well that I think would actually benefit the charter. And since we can't discuss things, I would like at least an opportunity to have it on the agenda so I can try to persuade you why it's important enough to actually amend the charter for it.
Or you could first bring it up, if we adopt these rules, you could first
But
bring it up.
according to Mike, you can't persuade us.
But you can simply bring it up,
You can't persuade us.
Not tonight.
but not all things
And that's
require
the
persuasion.
reason for having both. If most of you think, pick an item that seems fairly commonsensical, and I want to talk about this, I'd like to move to direct staff to agendize this. If 4 of you want to do it, okay, it's done, and you're going to have a full discussion. If at first blush, it's really not anything you thought about, or maybe your initial inclination is, no, why are we going to talk about that? And it doesn't pick up 4 votes, you'd still get a chance at that next meeting to discuss it. You won't have a staff report, but to try and persuade your fellow committee members to add that to a future agenda.
Yeah, excuse me, but the rules of order allow you to move things to the next agenda if you get a consensus. So I don't see the problem here.
I don't see a problem either. It's just, it's a question of, do you want to do it like the council does,
Well-
where you need a majority? Or do you want to allow one committee member the chance to fully discuss it to try and persuade the others
In the next meeting.
at the next meeting? But I'm not arguing for or against, but that's the
Right,
difference.
I understand that. Part of the problem is, we have a charter and it works, okay? There are deficiencies, outdated portions of it, and I'll just say things that people may want to revise, okay? Those are basically, I'll just say, individual issues. They don't necessarily affect the whole city or the populace that votes. So the real question is, limited time, what can we get past the council, or what recommendations we can do to make their job easier? Because basically that's our job, just be the sifter of ideas and then pass them on. And then they're going to put them on the ballot, all right? There are already hot button issues that are just going to inflame and are going to be 50% on one side and 50% of the other side, okay? And we only get, what, 15% of people in the city vote anyway. So given that, you're really dealing with, what, 7,000 people you got to influence. So the real question is, are we going to do what's best for the future for the city and in the limited time that we have? Basically, I watched it, the first meeting on Zoom, and I'm sitting here for the next one, but we haven't done anything.
Right.
Okay? So the real question is, do we want to, I'll put it a different way. This is my past person talking here. Ingenuity and acceptance for new ideas only goes as far as your ask and endure. So we're going to sit here watching and talking about things. We're not going to get anything done because we're going to dig in at some point and say, oh no, I'm not going to do that. We have to come down to some point of brevity. So the charter is so big. If there's defects in it or additions that need to be, we need to bring those forward. And we need to put that in writing, get it on an agenda and discuss it. We don't need to rewrite the charter. We don't need to correct ills that somebody perceives that is incorrect, I'll say, suits their management style. We need to get something that suits the people of Redondo. We're blessed to live in a city that is a charter city. If you look around at general law cities and I just don't get that people don't get it.
Let's get back to
So
how we want to
let's get
set our
back to,
rules
let's
here.
get back to
Let's get our
time, okay?
rules set.
So restate your motion and I assume you have a motion there.
I do, there's just more to it. There's more corrections that need to be made.
Why don't we
Well, why can't you bifurcate it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
No,
With all of them?
Make a whole motion. Just do it.
Okay.
So,
Will we be able to absorb the whole motion?
I think so.
Okay.
Most of them are pretty
Well,
rudimentary.
you're giving me more credit than I'm due, I guess.
We were given a document. I'm going to make a motion to amend the document
Okay.
as follows. Under section 1A2, it states cell phone number. Let's just kill cell. For example, Mr. Solomon, I don't believe is able to even get cell service where he's at right now. Let's just say phone number by which the committee member participating remotely may be reached. And moving down under B1, proof of posting, the committee member, I believe that should be will instead of ill. Announce, and then further down, was posted at the remote location according to law rather than accordingly to law. And moving down under
May I
section,
make an amendment to your amendment since you're in part one? I think what we haven't put in here is with Mr. Solomon remotely, I think we need to put something in there that even if he is the vice chair, if you ever decide to go remotely, that you can't preside over this body without physically being present. Because I think it makes a big difference in how we do stuff. Also, because we've decided to go remotely, you have to figure out the priority. Is it going to be, if somebody has a medical issue, does that get priority over somebody else not doing it because they're out of town for that day? So I think you need to also include something that talks about that in that part. And then on posting of the agenda, I would think it would be tremendously beneficial to us in preparing for this meeting if we can have some rule in there that allows for us to receive the minutes in advance, well in advance of the meeting as soon as it's done, so that we can actually review it, make notes, as you've been doing today, and actually at least absorbing what's being presented in the minutes. So those are my two suggested amendments to what you just started with.
I'm going to not accept either of those as friendly amendments. I think it is okay to have a chair that is remote. I don't intend on being remote at any point, but I think that's okay. I agree with the general, Mr. Punzer, you pointed this out. Being present is far more a positive for things like this, but I wouldn't want to put it in here that chair would not be able, or if the chair wasn't present, the vice chair would not be able to participate as the chair pro tem remotely. I think that would get complicated. I just don't see us running into that. And the second one was to do with getting the minutes earlier. I think that presents problems for the city clerk.
Yeah, our turnaround is probably about 2 weeks, but then we have issues with minutes. Secretaries could be 3. So, I mean, we could do it, but it would be considered a draft. Well, we're looking at it. So,
Mr. Pinzer, do you have a comment here?
Well, two things. One is we've learned over the last 2 years that you could run meetings over Zoom. So that's really not an issue. The second thing is that we're not the only game in town for the clerk.
Correct.
So sign up, get a notification. When the agenda is released, you have 3 days to look at the
Just like everybody else.
At the minutes.
everybody else, yeah.
So basically, you're supporting my denying the friendly amendments.
Sorry?
Basically, it sounds like you're supporting my denying.
Yeah, oh,
those friendly
absolutely.
amendments. Okay.
Yeah.
So we are now into item 2, consent calendar. Items removed from the consent calendar, I would just change that to items pulled from the consent calendar. And then it says will be taken up under the section items for discussion prior to action. I don't believe that's what happens. I think that it should read will be addressed and voted on individually under excluded consent calendar items. That's exactly what we did tonight. Is that clear enough? Okay. Next page, under section 3, there's an item B, but there is no item A. I believe item A would be appropriate to put before these agenda items, the very first sentence there under the title. And then item B could stay as it is. Under section 4, similar type of thing. I think A should go in front of order of priority. There's a hanging C down there that should become a B and then change all the numbering further down.
As I mentioned,
Yes.
we took these from the council rules. The council rules have all of these errors in that.
We can fix them.
Because, well, I was going to say, we're going to bring it back. So you can make those motions, but it all has to be brought back for non-substantive changes.
Okay. And then under section 4, what's currently stated as D, says the public participation portion of the agenda shall be reserved for the Republic to address the committee regarding general problems. So again, this is taken from city council?
Yep. The only thing I added was within the scope of the subject matter jurisdiction.
Yes. Okay, so.
I
But
want to hear about potholes.
Unless you want to make a charter
I don't believe you can
dealing with how potholes are
I don't believe you can restrict it to general problems, questions, or complaints, but it can be restricted to scope of the subject matter jurisdiction.
Yes.
Okay, so basically striking, address the committee regarding items within the scope of its matter jurisdiction.
Yeah, and you may want to put not otherwise on the agenda.
Can you do that? I thought they could speak about anything they want.
It already speaks
Well,
to
but
that.
yes, they can if it's within your subject matter jurisdiction.
Right.
But like but they can't, and sometimes happens, they're talking about an item that's actually on the agenda under J2. And there you can say, just please hold your thought and you'll talk about
I
it.
meant that they get up there and talk about there's no toilet paper or something like that.
Well, that's under our jurisdiction.
I guess it is.
So, Eleanor, to be caught that
Council, it's not under
we're
yours.
striking general problems,
City
questions.
manager, actually.
Or complaints.
We're striking general problems, questions, or complaints, and just say regarding items within the scope of its subject matter jurisdiction,
Not otherwise on the agenda.
not otherwise on the agenda. But this isn't only for the non-agenda.
Public participation is non-agenda in this particular case.
Right, because you're not going to agendize something not within your.
Item F, it states that the wishing to address the committee shall step up to the microphone, clearly state his or her name and address. I don't believe we can demand a name.
We can't, but like I said, I just took the council rules. I didn't write the council rules, and you can amend them. Just wanted to have the things we had talked about it.
Boilerplate. So how about if we just strike the word shall?
Yeah,
To address the committee by stepping to the microphone, clearly state his, or we can request it.
Yep.
We cannot enforce it.
that is correct.
Okay. Clear enough, Eleanor? Thank you.
That's correct. too.
We always have the ability to extend, motion to extend. So do we need to write that in here? Or?
We don't need to. It's helpful that, the only thing you can't do is favor one side of a particular argument. You have to be neutral on the substance of it.
I don't think we need to put it in there. I just had that question. I think it's inherently known that we can do that. Next page.
Gene's given up the will to live.
I'm still here.
Item I, again, we're under, what's listed as item I right now, under section 4, states that no questions shall be directed to a member of the committee or the city staff except through and with the permission of the presiding officer.
Well, technically, that's correct. It's the most violated rule of the city council. Because people show up and attack individual members of staff, the council, but actually, the purpose of the non-agenda item is to discuss the council as a whole. It's immaterial to me what you decide to put in.
But it means I have to, the way it's written, the presiding officer has to give permission before they state a question.
Well, mostly you would, well, because it's to the council as a whole, and a committee as a whole, and committee member can't answer questions under its non-agenda item.
Okay.
You can give really brief response, but you can't give them answers. Why don't we have this? Why don't we have a charter section on this.
Okay.
I'm asking you, why don't we have, like, you can't tell? And a lot of times people before the council will say things that are just not so. And the council would love to be able to explain why it's not so, but
I
they
just let
can't.
them know they can't ask questions,
Yeah.
basically. Okay. And then
Well,
item,
you can't, they can ask them, you can't answer them.
okay. Item J, speakers shall confine their remarks to those which are relevant to the subject under consideration, but this, I would say, except for non-agenda.
No,
No, because then they can talk about all the agenda items. If they're in non-agenda items, they should talk
Okay.
about non-agenda items.
That's
an
the
agenda
meaning of-
item.
that's the meaning of that. Okay.
Non-agenda is an agenda item. That's all, that's what they can
Okay.
talk about.
All right,
And,
understood.
and depending on if you have non-regular meetings, if you call special meetings, there's some, you don't have non-agenda items for those.
Okay, that's fine. Under section 5, moving on, paragraph A, for purpose of conducting its, I believe it's written as its, comma, right now, I believe that's meant to be an its apostrophe for the possessive its and not a comma there. Chair pro tem, do we want to call it vice chair, or since we have named it? Let's name it vice chair. Under C, procedural rulings, A subject to, I believe that's R subject to the concurrence of the committee. Subject to can be interpreted as a must or a may. Procedural rulings, basically by the chair, presiding officer, does subject to meaning that the committee can challenge them and overrule them, or
Yes.
that is,
You can challenge and overrule
okay.
if they think
But
the chair is wrong.
it doesn't require
Correct.
a permissive vote. It is
Right. And if you pick Rosenberg's rules, which is in 5A, that makes it clear.
okay. So if we're going to that, okay. Any method to, I believe overruling the decision of the chair is decided or discussed in Rosenberg's as well.
Yes.
So that can be covered there. And that's it, except for section 6, our favorite one. Here I had stated to create item A as by a majority vote of the voting members, open parenthesis, or their alternate in their absence, close parenthesis, present, any item may be placed directly on a future agenda for a full report, discussion, and action. Leave item A as it's written in its entirety, just call it item B. Because I would call item A as the primary route.
So restate the new A.
The new A is by a majority vote of the voting members, open parenthesis, or their alternate in their absence, close parenthesis, present, any item may be placed directly on a future agenda for a full report, discussion, and action.
You may want to put full majority of the voting members present.
I copied the verbiage that's in the resolution.
Yeah, I was thinking through what happens.
It does
if-
say present.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I didn't hear that.
So
when
yeah,
you said-
yeah, by a majority vote of the voting member or their alternate in their absence, present.
Okay, got
It
it.
is the
Okay.
total that are present.
Got it.
Be that alternates or members, whoever's up here on the dais, it is a majority of them.
I apologize
So if
for
we
missing
had
that.
6, it would still be 4. If we had 5, it would move to 3, but normally it will be 4. And that, I'm sorry, Mr. President, that's the best I can offer for covering what you're looking to
Just
do.
one thing, going back to 2A, where you say about the consent calendar pulled items, there's already a item there that says excluded consent calendar items. That's what that's for.
Right, because what it said is it would move it to, under the section items for discussion prior to action, which isn't correct.
Right, so there already is a thing on there that says excluded consent calendar.
There
That's how
is.
it works. That's what it's there for.
Understood, and I'm making what this says match what is in place now and what, for example, what we did tonight. And that's all.
I have a question or
Yes, sir.
concern. I know you only had this for a couple hours to do it, but I think it's a nice courtesy, and this goes to everybody, including myself. When there's something that extensive, if we have the ability to present something in writing so the clerk has it, and it even can project it on the screen so we can all see it, it makes it a lot easier to absorb it. I know this came in at the last minute, so there's not much you could do, but.
Yeah, we didn't get these until
I know,
3:30.
so but I'm just saying in the future, like when I'm going to present stuff, I'm going to try to get it in writing so that people can
Acknowledged.
actually see it.
Acknowledged, and I agree. So most of it was just some cleanup. The only substantive item would be under section 6.
Should have started with that one, by the way.
I did, and then I came back to it.
Just so you know, yes.
All right. Any members of the public wish to have a comment?
Well, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Have a
Just
motion,
want to make sure.
motion and a second. Okay, any members of the public wish to comment?
Do I have to move this up?
You can bring it up.
He actually, it's better to just leave it the way it is. The mic will actually read, can hear your voice.
Okay, great. Hi, good evening. Matthew Hensley, one of the alternate members. I just wanted to comment on one item, which is under section 4K. This is about someone speaking twice. This came up at the last meeting. As currently written, it says additional remarks shall be limited to 1 minute, but I think that limitation is unnecessary. The chair can decide to give them 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever is extended, and that fairness can be applied to everybody, but as written, it's, additional remarks shall be limited to 1 minute. So I think that should be edited to not have such a restriction. Does that make sense? Okay.
Anyone else from the public?
You gonna explain this?
State your name, please.
Nils Nernheim, also happen to be on city council. So don't make this more complicated than you need to. Listen, first of all, I just want to tell you that I trust you guys. As the motion maker last time, I trust you guys. You have 2 former council members. You've got a current school board member, former commissioner. You got 2 current commissioners. I'm not sure. I don't think you're a commissioner. I'm not sure. Okay. You guys are all smart, but you're a lawyer. You're smart. If you bring up 10 items or 20 items, you've got a person here who runs the meeting and say, listen, we've got an item. The person says we need to paint all houses in Redondo Beach pink. You say, you know what, let me have 1 minute for every person, then we can vote on this and we'll move on. It's real simple, professionalism. As the motion maker last time, I can tell you that I didn't ask for anything to be removed. In fact, I specifically talked about the city attorney's position. And the reason why I talked about that is because coming up in the election cycle, we're voting on the city treasurer and city clerk's position. So if you change any of the responsibilities, it wouldn't apply to the next cycle of treasurer clerks. But our next cycle after that, 2025, we have council and mayor and a city attorney's position. So I would make that very important point. If you're going to change one of these positions, that is the most important thing you need to change. There's the administrative items that need to be updated. Those can easily be handled by you guys very quickly, or administrative. You have, in fact, the budget finance commissioner, Commissioner Solomon, has high depth experience at the Budget and Finance Commission. Going over the Moss Adams report, the city clerk is very well aware of the change that they have requested in there. It's not new. I specifically had in here, have as many meetings as you want. Didn't want to keep you into one. You guys keep saying 4, 2, 4, 5, 4. You can have 2 meetings a month. We specifically put the online portion in here, so if someone is away, like Commissioner Solomon, they can still participate. And even if they can't, then they can't, you have a backup. You move things along. When it comes to your minutes, I totally understand what you're saying in minutes, but we've got YouTube. We've got modern technology to help us move along. And I think the most important aspect here moving forward is you're a professional body. You guys know what you're doing. And don't get hung up on the small things. If you have an issue, we can always talk about it later. So thank you if you have any questions. Joe.
Kept it under 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
For Councilmember Narenheim, can you clarify the item that came up before about everything being done by November 1st? If his recollection of the council motion, or that the items that we would like to see done to be put on the ballot done by November 1st?
Great ask, Commissioner Solomon. And the chair can do this remotely too, if he's remote. You know, to the question of what is important, the important items that we need to take care of at the council, asked you guys to take care of, city attorney's position, administrative items, and to move down that path and why that's important, again, you can only change that every 4 years. So to further clarify that, once you hire someone for that position, the city votes for that position, those responsibilities, including the pay, cannot be changed. They're set in stone for 4 years. Okay, so administrative items that you would want to update are important, obviously, but the most important items, get them done by November, so we as a council can be done and include it, have time with the clerk's office, include it on the agenda, and then post it by November and have all the items on the election in March. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Solomon, or do you have a follow-up on that?
The follow-up being that, would you or the council in their discussions allow for there could be work by this body beyond that November 1st reporting date for changes that might happen in future elections?
Absolutely. So we did not want to hamstring you in your scope, but more importantly, we wanted to hamstring you on what was coming up in March. So what is important versus what is not important. So if there are administrative updates that are very clear and simple, as you, Commissioner Solomon, do understand from Budget Finance Commission through the Malice Adams report of things that need to be updated in Treasurer's Office and responsibilities, that need to be done or should be done ASAP. In fact, I just got a letter today about an email today that we need to get fixing on our ordinances. It's very important. So you guys can extend beyond November and slow it down then and update other items such as the city treasurer's and city clerk's office, because they're going to be elected in March, and whatever your changes you guys do are not going to be effective until 2027. So take your time with that. And if you want to make broader scope changes, right, to the city itself, for instance, you wanted to change elected's responsibilities or add something, you can do that at a later date.
So if I can.
So then it answers the question of us having, I beg your pardon, Mr. Webb?
Well, it doesn't. It's important, the motion that's made, not the subjective intent of someone who actually wasn't the motion maker. He was offered a friendly amendment to the motion maker of the substitute motion, which was Councilmember Obagi. And when Councilmember MD asked right before the vote for Councilmember Obagi to restate his motion, the language was, we want to report with all your decisions by November 1st. And the language we used was all. That doesn't mean the council can't come back and authorize an extension of time, continued work, but that language is what controls. And, you know, I wish the council was more precise sometimes in making certain, trying to be non-confrontational, but the word was all. You know, and that's what he said, and so it's not it's the motion that controls. I'm just pointing that out so that the committee doesn't think, okay, well, whatever we do, which is what he said, if we want to extend, we can't. Not necessarily. I fully expect that the council would extend, but you should try and get your, you have a deadline of November 1st. And as we talked about in the first meeting, one of the things you may want to take into account is, will it be something like likely that the mayor and council will support putting on the ballot? Or will it be something that the voters will support? Because otherwise, it's not going to come to fruition.
So as one of the original motion makers in the original motion, the intent of the report is for updates. And if you go back and notice and read the historical documents the last time we did this, there was very sparse reporting, and one of the issues that they had was, well, what's going on? Well, we do have YouTube nowadays, and the only reason why I wanted to include any type of reporting at all was to ensure that you guys are kept on track. We do not specify or make it complicated with a person coming down, or they're including minutes. It could just be a one simple page, hey, this is what we talked about, this is what we agreed to, haven't agreed to, nor was there an end date. And I never specifically said an end date on the report. The report shall include or be the end date for the commission, Charter Review Commission. And that is the most important aspect, is I never set an end date for you regarding the report. The report is not the end date, it's an update. And making sure that the council, as we all know, is very busy. We don't have time necessarily to watch YouTube or watch all of these events. So just a simple written update report would have been good. But you know what, and I agreed and acquiesced to, hey, just a final report, or a report in November, not a final report, what you're done, and otherwise we can move forward at the council level. So that was the over explanation on the report.
Which none of which made it into the final motion. So the original motion did, and when we had a discussion, I had said, hey, you can take as long as you want. You could be here for 3 years in terms of looking at all those items. That's what I explained with the original motion. And I was going to bring something just to allow you to have more than one meeting a month. The council chose to make other changes late at night after having a full budget meeting, and we are all have to deal with the resolution as written.
And it was a 31-minute discussion. It was not short.
There was a reason the 10:30 mark was put on it.
Ms. Solomon, any further questions?
Only a remark that it would be, it wouldn't be, Mr. Webb, then beyond the scope of what we could do as a committee to say, we understand the resolution and the city council's intent was all items by November 1st. Perhaps we could ask them, or if there's a way that we could ask them to say all prioritized items within the original resolution, or to consider that, just to allow for us not to take care of the priority items first, but not be precluded asking the council's opinion from taking care of other things afterwards. Going back to what committee member Morocco said, there are other items that probably should be looked at or could be looked at. So maybe that's a question we can ask the council again to clarify, please.
Well, be careful what you wish for, but all of you can approach the council members individually. And I think it would be perfectly appropriate for the committee to keep in mind anything that can go on the March election versus November election. And I would expect if the majority of the council committee wishes to continue meeting, at that point, you can say, hey, and we recommend that we continue to meet and put stuff on for, the state primary or state general election as we're allowed.
Rolf?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Under the belief that things fill available space, the idea of having in November, if we feel that we have too much on that agenda, we could have another meeting, but aiming toward November is not a bad idea.
Absolutely.
So.
Agreed.
For everything. So let's get it all on the table. We've all read the chart. We all have our ideas of what we might do. And they're not 50, they're maybe 10. But there was a whole list that we got from the council originally, which are all great questions. I would add one, maybe two. But the issue of focusing ourselves so that we have to get it done by then is not a bad idea.
Correct.
So let's stick with that.
Okay. Any other comments from the committee? Any other public comments?
I have none for Zoom. Do you have anything for e-comments?
There are no attendees in Zoom and no e-comments at this time.
Okay, so closing of public comment, we have a motion and a second. Let's just do a roll call vote, keep it simple, with Mr. Solomon online.
Okay, Committee Member Dubiak,
Aye.
Committee Member Solomon,
Aye.
Committee Member Maruka,
Aye.
Committee Member Narain,
Aye.
Committee Member Pinsler,
Aye.
Committee Member Wenderly,
Aye.
and Chairperson Strenberg.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. So we have rules of conduct as amended, and we would get a copy of that.
We'll get it for you.
I think it's actually rules of operation. Conduct is a whole nother story.
We'll have it next week, at the end of next week.
So, but they are in place at this point. We have adopted them.
Yes.
So moving into item K, member items and referrals to staff. Would anyone like to make a motion to refer items to staff for the next meeting?
And you don't have to do this, but generally you go in order from District 1 to, so you can just go in order and get the list and take a vote as each suggestion comes about.
Well, that would be confusing for me to keep track of
Okay.
each district and.
Then
Left to right. Left to right.
it was simple, yes.
Mr. Dwithiak,
None.
Mr. Solomon,
Well, I would recommend that we consider, and please inform me, Madam Clerk or Mr. Webb, items J3, J4, J5, J6, J7, and J8, along with an initial discussion of the city attorney elected position for our next meeting. Is that the appropriate way you wanted it handled, Mr. Webb?
I think it would be the most efficient, although a committee member can seek to remove, just, it's almost like consent, remove. Well, I don't think we should talk about J5, for example, and then you can deal with that separately.
so Mr. Solomon, that was a motion?
No, it's a referral.
Yes, sir.
Or referral, and is.
We'll have to vote on it, though.
Correct,
Agenda.
but no discussion.
The referral to agendize those items.
Okay, with our new rules then, would it be proper to take a vote first on that one?
Yeah.
Okay, and it doesn't require a second?
It does, well.
I'll second if it does require it.
Okay. So we have a referral motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Mr. Solomon, I did hear your aye. Thank you. Mr. Morocco.
So in response to committee member Pinsler's comment about wanting to know the history of the charter, I did put something together and I shared it with the city attorney and the clerk's office. And I would like to agendize that so that the whole committee as a whole can see it and discuss and ask questions. It goes back to the 1920s. So I think that's what you were looking for with regards to that. And it talks about a number of the amendments. So as my first step, I would like to at least agendize the history of the charter as an item on our next agenda. If you just read it, you read it. If you don't, you don't.
That's great.
Is the great a second?
Yeah. No, yeah, I didn't think we needed a second, but yes.
Yeah, and you just vote.
Let's continue roll call votes with Mr. Solomon on that. I think it's cleaner.
Committee Member Dubiak,
Aye.
Committee Member Solomon,
Aye.
Committee Member Maruko,
Aye.
Committee Member Haran,
Aye.
Committee Member Pinsler,
Aye.
Committee Member Wenderly,
Aye.
Chairperson Strenberg.
Aye. Motion passes unanimous.
Okay,
Was
so
there-
I have a,
Let's combine any remaining items if we could, if you want
that was the
to.
only thing I needed to agendize. Now I'm just
Okay.
telling you what items I'm going to be asking for at the next several meetings to get onto the agenda, so that you'll at least get a roadmap of where I'm going to be. So in reviewing the charter, I've looked at Article 15, which is dealing with the boards and commission, and 15.2, 5, 7, and 8, I'm going to be asking for the board to, the commission to consider changing. And I will have specific language presented there. Article 15 was pulled out of the prior, I guess 1974 by a vote. I've pulled that Measure D, which is what pulled it out, and I think it needs to be looked at again. Also, since we are talking about remote settings, I would like to at least examine whether we are limited to just having, as part of our charter, the location of the meeting being in the council chambers, as opposed to some other building in the city that's open to the public. And I'm sure there's going to be some staff comments about it, so I wanted to talk about that. Article 10, which deals with the term of office. There was at one point a charter where they were proposing 2-year terms of office for the mayor and the council, as well as some of the other elected officers versus 4 years. I think in the long term, that may be something, maybe after November 1st, if we continue to go on, I think we need to look at that. Article 9.11, which is the emergency ordinance. I don't think we've ever had an emergency ordinance until recently, and I think since we just had it, it would be a good opportunity to look at that section and figure out if it's working the way it's supposed to, and kind of spell out, does the emergency ordinance override the charter? Since the charter is the Constitution, I will tell you that I am looking at all the ordinances that are in the municipal code that we have, seeing whether some should be brought up as part of the charter, or with a recommendation even to the council that maybe they need to review some of the oil wells. It's like, why do we have that there? Then I think, as already been brought up, we're going to look at the city attorney, the clerk, and the treasurer. But one of the things that I would like as part of that discussion when we talk about the city attorney is what is the responsibility of being responsive to the public that elects you? And I think that goes with the clerk and the treasurer. So I think when we do that discussion, I would like to at least explore that as well. And then also with the city attorney, specifically section 10.3 about the residency rule, which may come into play if ultimately we decide that we're going to have an appointed versus an elected one. I also think it's important in the charter when we talk about the clerk is, what is the responsibility of the city to keep records? Right now, when I get an email that says this is only going to be good for 90 days and it's gone, do we want something more comprehensive about that? And then when you do talk about the treasurer, in reading through it, there were sections in there where it sounded like the clerk does a lot of the treasurer functions anyway, including the qualification to be a clerk. So when we do that discussion on treasurer, I'd like to be able to have something where it kind of compares out what the clerk does versus what the treasurer does versus what the financial officer, department head does, so that we can at least get a clearer picture on that. And that's going to be my list for now, but thank you.
Okay, just to clarify, if I may, are you requesting that any of those be committed to the first step at the next meeting under Article 6B?
I think Article 50,
Our Article 6B of the Rules of Conduct, which we've established tonight, that are you asking that those any of those come back at the next meeting? Or are you just giving us a heads up?
I'm giving you a heads up. What I would like to have come back is the stuff about the commission, which is Article 15 of the charter, and the terms, whether, because as Councilman Naramhein mentioned, some of the stuff that goes into effect will impact the next people around. So if we want to look at, and it's maybe very quickly disposed of, 2 years versus 4 years, what's the difference,
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
But those are the two things you're
Those are the two
specifically
things.
asking to come back under the two-step process, with step one being at the next meeting
Correct.
for those two items. Is that clear, City Clerk and Mr. Webb?
And would that be a Brown violation if I give my proposal to what I think this change should be to either the clerk or the city attorney?
No, all you need right now is to bring the question back,
Okay.
my guess.
So.
You're hesitating, Mr. Webb, I see that.
Well, okay. So the history one is on the step two, correct? You already voted on that. So the
Correct, so that one's a
item for
full
next
discussion.
meeting. And so your question to council, to committee member Rocco, and that he answered in the affirmative, is the Article 15 commissions, whether that should be put back on the charter. That will be step one for next meeting. The term, and I didn't catch that, the length of term for what positions?
For all positions.
For all terms, whether it should be 4 years or 2 years
Right.
for step one.
Which article was that under?
10.
10, okay.
And,
And then when we
well, okay, so is it all positions?
All
That's the
positions.
question.
I mean, this is a general discussion by the group, and they can narrow it down or
All
throw it out.
positions
or-
or all term limited positions?
All elected positions.
Okay, that's what I,
Okay, that's a,
That's a
okay.
big difference.
yes, so all elected positions.
Except for, yeah, no city manager or anything like that.
Got it. So that will be step one. That will include the school board. So just giving you heads up. And what was the third one?
That was it. The
That
others
was
were
it.
simply a
Okay.
heads up. That's why I wanted to
I just
clarify
didn't want-
that.
Except for the city attorney, if we were going to bring that, somebody's going to bring that up on our agenda, which I think,
No, we already did.
Okay, sorry.
That was part of
Mr.
Mr.
Solomon put-
Solomon's motion, but clerk and treasurer will not be.
Okay, so just to clarify now, under the verbiage here, the first step, a very brief report where the committee member has the opportunity. So
Yep.
it's not expecting a staff report on this. This is for you.
You'll be presenting why you think, and then you can have a full discussion.
well, that was my question. Do you want me to prepare something so I don't have a situation where I'm reading through proposed language?
You can and send it to the clerk, and then it will be, not, but don't send it to the other committee members until it goes out in the agenda. So they have it at the same time, but not before the public. So send it to me, send it to the clerk, and then it will be attached to the agenda.
And mark it clearly as, this is my report on this item, this is my report on this item.
And the action you'd be asking for is approval from the majority of your colleagues to agendize it for a full report at the next agenda item, the next agenda.
If it moves from that point.
Well, that's his request, is to ask for that.
Okay. And under 6B, that's it. That's all you need. That's done.
Okay.
Mr. Ray, none? Mr. Penzler?
Yeah, we had been requested to deal with the city clerk and the city treasurer, which I think we should do. We've already gotten some of the comments from it, but I also would like to add the 6-member council to review that and to see whether that is still a legitimate way of managing the city.
5+1 council,
5 plus 1.
not 6 members.
Again, are you requesting this
You
as?
mean
step-
at-large people? Do you
Sorry?
mean at-large? Do
No.
you mean to look at it at-large?
No, not at all. So whether or not we should have a 5 plus 1 city council.
Well, just to clarify, we don't have a 5+1, we have a mayor. So we don't have a 5+1 city council. We have 5 city council members and a mayor.
Right.
Do you want a discussion of
Right.
that? Is that the step one? Okay, step one.
And again, so they're, your two
Same thing,
items.
I'm sorry, same thing with city clerk and city
City clerk and city
treasurer.
treasurer, which we've gotten,
Is that
Yeah.
step one, not step two?
yeah.
Okay, so you'll be presenting whatever
Right.
at the next meeting.
Okay.
Very good. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Committee member Wonderly.
For the step one process, I would like to discuss making sure, and I can present a markup, that our city charter is gender neutral in its language.
That I was going to say.
So you said step one process, meaning that step one of the two-step process or?
I mean, I don't think there's a rush to
Okay.
this personally. I'd rather just, let's mark it up, get it on there, people can look at it, and then we can move forward.
And you may recall from the first meeting, the previous Charter Review Committee looked at it, but just decided not to, it wasn't time to implement it, so it should,
It should be in parentheses somewhere.
yes, so look at, you may want to look at that for your markup.
May I ask a question about that? If language is changed, would the entire charter be on the ballot?
Large sections of it would be on the ballot.
Yeah.
Then comes the question, is it done as a whole or as individual?
Well, I think it'd be a separate motion. It would be, we want to amend, 18 of these sections to include gender neutral language, and it would make no other substantive change. So that would be a separate, because each of these things is going to be a separate thumbs up or thumbs down by the public, and some will not be at all controversial based in the past. Some will be immensely controversial.
Forgot us that city council is going to take a chop on this.
Yeah,
We're getting into
Yes.
discussion again.
And the people get the.
right.
Let's let Ms. Wonderly present what she has and see how in-depth it is, and thank you for that. Now, is that it for yours?
Yes.
Okay. As a member item referral to staff, I'm going to offer to the committee, would the committee like to potentially set another meeting before the next regularly scheduled meeting on July 28th?
Okay, so so you have no items for?
No,
one-
the items that were covered I'm good with that.
All right, so we're moving to adjournment, and so you could adjourn to a specific day.
Well, but I'm asking the committee first.
Yeah, that's.
Is there a date that they would like to
The question is,
adjourn
when do you
to?
want to adjourn to?
And we would need to discuss availability and so forth. Anyone, or are we good with the next regularly scheduled at July 28th? I would like to see another meeting before that in July to get us going, especially with consideration of what happened
I'm
tonight.
available. Pick a date.
Yeah, I'm available too, but I'm not sure the city's available,
That's what I gotta,
Well-
give me a date so I can figure out.
which
what
means
I'm-
maybe a Saturday.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
Maybe a Saturday. It also depends on whether the level of staff report that you get, because we have the 3-day holiday and, 4-day holiday because City Hall is closed tomorrow. We have a council meeting. And
Well, the only staff report that would be required would be on city attorney.
No.
Is-
Got all the-
You have
But these are all existing already.
yeah,
You still have to be here.
right, and they didn't have, they would normally prepare a more expansive report and make it clear why they brought that up and what your options are. And I'm not certain with a holiday, a council meeting, then preparing for the next council meeting and
Theoretically speaking, though, not to interrupt, they're prepared to do J3 through 8 tonight,
true,
all right?
true.
So all that work is done already.
That's the bulk of the next
Okay,
meeting.
so that's,
Okay, I mean, I like the backpedaling, but I often call bullshit flags.
July 14th, Thursday.
Can't do it.
It works for me.
Budget
It's
and finance
available.
is that.
May I make a suggestion? My commission usually would have met on July 20th, and I was informed that they're canceling that meeting. So the staff is available that day. That's a Wednesday night, if that works for you.
That
Yeah,
gives
there's a
staff-
Budget and Finance Commission meeting July 14th.
Okay, but the 20th appears to be available.
Correct.
I hate to put it this way, but I'm retired, so this.
I could do the 20th, but there's a Budget and Finance meeting the 14th.
Our job is waking up.
I can do the 20th.
I think I should be the 20th also.
Okay,
I'll make myself available.
20th.
okay.
20th at 7 PM.
20th at 7 PM
Here.
here. And that would be,
In addition to the 28th.
In addition, so everything we requested for the next meeting is now the 20th.
Correct.
Just momentum.
And we would quickly have a follow-up meeting on the 28th.
Assuming that if we say
And
yes
Mr.
on the
Webb, to be
20th,
fair,
the things on the 28th, will they be ready?
That's the question.
Yeah.
You'll have to.
Mr. Webb, to be fair to the staff, I had spoken to the city manager about the report that had been added as a blue folder item that we won't speak of, but I think they could be updating that. So they'll have a little bit of a head start on some of these things.
Look, I'm not involved in that part, and I can have the city attorney stuff at least somewhat ready for the 20th. And I was just pointing out the different, and there's a question of how much, if you finish everything on the 20th, how much can be moved, can be ready for stage 2 on the 28th. But I certainly, with the time limit, I think it makes sense to have an extra meeting.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Okay, so this is kind of outside of, it's not really an agenda item, but
Yes, it is.
we're all in agreement, so.
German is an agenda
You're
item.
adjourning. You're adjourning to the 20th instead of the 28th.
Okay.
I will not be here since I have a procedure I have to do.
Okay.
So I will not be here.
So with that,
We'll
can I
miss you.
I'll entertain a motion, a second, to adjourn to July 20th at 7 PM.
So moved.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Spencer. All in favor? Aye.
All right?
Any opposed? We are adjourned to July 20th.
There wasn't a whole lot of enthusiasm in the German. You guys want to stay? You guys want to